All right, greetings. Welcome back to Blackburn News, where everything. All right, greetings. Welcome back to Blackburn News, where everything is connected. I'm going to remember to do that one of these days. How y'all doing? Welcome. Greetings. Hello. What is this? Kent. Hold on. What is this? Denver Adway, Kent. A fire? Dang it. It's got a big cough thing going on. I don't know what, Kent, Ohio? Food production plant. Ah, okay, all right. I was like, what's happening? Food production plant. Bombs and fireworks aren't made of TNT or gunpowder. Let me see. But flour. It's interesting. Okay. Yeah. I was actually commenting to a friend about on the topic of food and food scarcity. Has anybody noticed that there are things missing from the grocery store? I've just noticed this lately. It's kind of weird because I thought I understand that there are still supply chain issues and that there's a war and stuff happening or whatever. I know all that stuff is happening, but I thought we were kind of past the pandemic kind of food chain or supply chain issues. I thought we were kind of past that, but I've noticed more and more recently that things are missing from the grocery store. Like it's increasing. The amount of things, I'm walking into a grocery store and I'll look over at an aisle or whatever, and they'll just be like, or stuff I'm looking for is not there anymore or is barely there. And I'm like, why is this happening now? What's going on? I don't know. Gene says, Kevin, do you know that farmers lost something like 70% of their cotton crop? I didn't know that, but it wouldn't surprise me. Right. There are these things going on, these situations where food distribution plants or food production plants are going up in flames or something is happening. That is happening. And farmers are losing a lot of their crops all over the planet. That is also happening too. So these two things are absolutely happening. And so when you look at the world situation, when you look at the world, the situation around the world, you have to take all of these factors into account, right? You can't say one thing isn't happening or that's just, and another thing is happening. You kind of have to take it all as a whole and acknowledge that there are several things happening all at the same time. So the people that want to say that somebody is engineering, this is all engineering a collapse or something like that. It's the situation is not 100% that, right? It could be happening. That could be happening. But that is only a part of the situation. And then other people want to say that climate change isn't happening and there's nothing, there's no That everything is engineered. Everything having to do with supply chain is engineered, and they're and what?
Unknown caller.
Dang it! Sorry, and right, they want to poo-poo the fact. Poo-poo. I like using that word. That fact that climate change, or there might actually be some, there might be consequences to climate change happening. I don't know what is going on with my dog. All right. Um, so I think it's a combination of things. I'm not saying everything's missing from the store, but I've just noticed more and more that there are empty shelves, that there are like holes in the areas where there used to be food. I'm like, oh, you know, where there used to be five different types of items, there's now one or none. Schulte says your friend got a bad case of the palsy from Moderna vaccine. Did they recover, or are they still experiencing the palsy? I wonder, because I've actually heard some other first-hand accounts of reactions. I have heard first-hand accounts. They're planning to seize farms in the Netherlands, says Basil Peterson. Yeah. Oh, that reminds me. By the way, I did get a after-hours tip on Rockfin. I got a tip from John House. Thanks, man. Strawberry sugar wafers. Oh, those are delicious. Yes, sir. I haven't had one of those in a long time, but I know exactly what you're talking about. All right. We're live on Callin Rockfin. YouTube, a good way to support the channel is buymeacoffee.com/blackbearnews, or Rockfin tips are good. Patreon/blackbearnews, also good. These are good ways to support the channel. It's slowly going away. He's getting a little better. Good. That's good. That's scary, right? All right, I'm just going to talk about a couple of things today. I didn't really bring a lot of news today. But I like this post from Victory Gin. And what they're saying is absolutely correct, right? To be honest, this seems worse than having the road blocked by climate activists for a few minutes, right? Having your town flooded, or having your food go away. Having a lot of food missing from the store. You know, I noticed this thing only because I noticed the food thing because because it's visible. But if you want to extrapolate that into the future, like what if a lot of things were missing, right? What if you went to the store and there were only a few things to buy? Then what would you do? Anyways, so when things start going away, or when this kind of stuff happens just all the time, or happens in a city near you, or happens to your city, or happens to your house, yeah, people get sitting on a bridge and blocking your merry way. Might not seem so dramatically bad. But I like that take. It's a good take. I want to read something from, I think, did Poppy send me this? Poppy sent me something that was cool. And um about biodiversity. 40 years into conservation biology, and I can tell you we are losing badly, getting our asses kicked. There are almost no reasons to be optimistic. This is from The Intercept, from Christopher Ketchum. And headline, addressing climate change will not save the planet. Interesting. The dismal reality is that green energy will not save the complex web of life on Earth, which is kind of exactly what, all of this ties together. All of this is part of the whole. All of this ties together. Right, we were talking the other day about overpopulation, and we're having a lively discussion around that. Will not save the complex web of life. That is what has fostered life on this planet and fostered the ability for man to evolve or come forth on this planet, is a complex web of life. That's what allows all other species to exist on the planet, is a complex. It's the web of life is complex. And what we don't understand is that we are slowly destroying that complex web of life. And we think that by just, eliminating emissions or, ending fossil fuels or going green or getting green energy into the mix, we think that that is going to save a complex web of life, right? We're addressing a very complex problem with very simple, singular answers. Simplistic is what I mean to say. By the way, quite a few people have mentioned to me having a panel, and maybe I think that's something I want to do. I do want to do that. I think we need to. I think we need to announce when that will be. Maybe we'll do. Let's think. Let's think about this. How about Friday? I think I know how to add the speakers on call-in. If you guys want to have like a call-in panel, we have a bunch of people at the same time talking about, pick a subject. It seemed like overpopulation was a popular subject, right? We could do it like that. Have a bunch of people as, just kind of in the call at the same time. If you guys are into that, I think that would be cool. But we're also trying to save the complex web of life with very techno fixes. Conservation biology finds itself in a terrifying place today, witness to mass extinction, helpless to stop the march of industrial Homo sapiens. The pillage of habitat, the loss of wildlands, and the impoverishment of ecosystems. Many of its leading figures are in despair. I'm 40 years into conservation biology, and I can tell you we are losing badly, getting our asses kicked. Dan Ash, director of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service under President Barack Obama, told me recently there are almost no reasons to be optimistic. The fact is that this is true. And so, you can be mad at the people, right? Like you can, at the same time, you could be mad at the elite class wanting to do things to society in the name of climate change. You'd be upset about that, but you also have to realize it's not a lie. It's not a hoax. It's not a like, oh, they're doing this thing and they're making it up. That's not what it is. It is actually happening. They're just using it for the wrong ends, or they're giving you the wrong answer. And the wrong answers are this, right? renewable energy, blah, blah, blah. Everybody buy electric cars, blah, blah, blah. This might explain the discipline's desperate hitching of its wagon to the climate movement. Climate, after all, is the environmental cause du jour, eclipsing all other sustainability concerns. Increasingly attractive as a rallying cry for a public that has canonized it as one of the major political, social, and economic issues of our time. Mainstream climate activism of the Bill McKibben variety points towards a grandly hopeful end within the confines of acceptable capitalist discourse. Decarbonization of the global economy with technologies driven by profit-seeking corporations subsidized by governments, taking up this banner of optimism, can-doism. The environmental movement has convinced itself and sought to convince the public that with a worldwide build-out of renewable energy systems, humanity will power its dynamic industrial civilization with jobs producing green machines, while also somehow rescuing countless species from the brink. Ash says, this happens to be a lie. The lie is that if we address the climate crisis, we will also solve the biodiversity crisis. A group of conservationists took up the question of climate and extinctions last year in the journal Conservation Letters, warning that threats to biodiversity are increasingly seen through the single myopic lens of climate change. The authors, who titled their article, "An Inconvenient Misconception, Climate Change is Not the Principal Driver of Biodiversity Loss," included Joel Berger, a wildlife biologist at Colorado State University, evolutionary biologist Andrew Dobson, who teaches at Princeton, and Tim Caro, an evolutionary biologist at the University of California, Davis. There is an assumption, they observed, that climate change is now the most important horseman of the biodiversity apocalypse, despite this being at best premature. When it comes to effects on wildlife, climate change is more like a mule, slow and plodding. Yes, a warmed atmosphere is projected to be a significant factor in the extinction crisis in future decades, but what's destroying species today is habitat fragmentation and loss. Right? Overhunting and overexploitation, agricultural expansion, pollution, and industrial development. I mean, I'm of the mind that they're hand in hand. These, they're saying that the biodiversity loss is a problem. I happen to think all of this together is a bad news day, right? It isn't climate change that caused 69% loss in total wildlife populations between 1970 and 2018. Yes, that's true. That's true. But also you could point to climate change causing a great loss of insects. So it's in there somewhere. But here they get to the meat of the matter. The cause is too many people demanding too much from ecosystems, or human overshoot of the biophysical carrying capacity of the earth. We just happen to be talking about this. We just happen to be talking about this like every single day. Overshoot is a product of both excessive numbers and rising affluence, both at the same time. It's not just the consumption, it's the number of people consuming and the excess consumption of a good number of those people. Access to the things that create what we call quality of life. Man, it sounds like this person has been listening to the show, especially like indoor lighting and temperature controls, especially air conditioning, more diverse dietary choices, especially meat, and greater access to transportation, especially air travel. All signs of rising affluence. All delightful if you are a human, yet all demand more energy and material inputs that involve scouring and denuding more wildlands and animal habitat to feed, clothe, house, and energize burgeoning humanity. According to the co-authors of the conservation letters, Peace, we are dangerously ignoring this reality and instead doubling down on the distortion that climate mitigation is all that matters to protecting wildlife. Over the last 30 years, the proportion of scientific papers closely tying climate change and global warming to changes in patterns of biodiversity has steadily increased, according to their analysis. Media coverage of climate change in relation to biodiversity has followed suit, repeating and compounding the error. The net result of this misguided focus on climate change has been the undermining of conservation science as an evidence-based scientific discipline. As Dobson put it to me, if conservation biologists don't take a balanced look at the evidence, they can't claim to be evidence-based. Sounds like what they're saying is climate change is also, and biodiversity loss is also, a symptom of overshoot, right? But if you separate it, if you compartmentalize it, oh, climate change, what do we do? The crux of the problem is that mainstream environmentalists have siloed climate change as a phenomenon apart from the broad human ecological footprint, separate from deforestation, overgrazing of livestock, megafauna kill-off, collapsing fisheries, desertification, depleted freshwater, soil degradation, oceanic garbage gyres, toxification of rainfall with microplastics, and on and on. The myriad biospheric effects of breakneck growth. Climate change is but one symptom of an environmentally dysfunctional system of constant growth of economies and populations, ecologist William Rees, professor emeritus at the University of British Columbia, told me. I mean, this is also the way people who deny climate change like to fragment things too, right? Oh, of course we're polluting the planet. Of course we're doing the damage, but it's like, but climate change isn't real, and the people that are doing the pollution are the bad people, and we're not part of that equation. We're just not even, right? It's not our fault. It's their fault, right? I don't know. The meta problem that we need to keep our eyes on, Rees said, is ecological overshoot. Modern techno-industrial culture, he writes, is systematically and even enthusiastically consuming the biophysical basis of its own existence. Rees describes this as a malignant process, humanity as cancer. They're trying to tell you that humans are bad. Rees is hardly alone in his stark assessments of the status quo. In the most recent letter of World Scientists warning, a semi-annual notice to the public, 12 experts in life sciences, global system dynamics, and ecology, noted that most planetary boundaries, that regulate the state of the Earth are beyond their safe space. Therefore, climate change is not a standalone issue. It's part of a larger systemic problem of ecological overshoot. The authors added the common sense observation that humanity cannot sustain unlimited growth in a finite world, a physical law of life on Earth that we ignore at our peril. It may be that solving the climate crisis because we will solve it. It may be that solving the climate crisis because we will solve it with bold technologies to maintain ourselves in overshoot. There you go. As opposed to practicing humility and restraint with an eye towards contraction of the human enterprise. Humility and constraint. Again, there's a disconnect. Well, you shouldn't eat too much because that's bad for you. You shouldn't drink too much. That's bad for you. Shouldn't, spend too much. That's bad for you. Shouldn't do too much of anything. Too much of anything is bad for you. But too many humans? No way. Poppycock. Okay. How come the rules apply to almost everything else except when you talk about humans? And then you're like, no, absolutely not. We're fine. I can drive. Um, anyways, is overshoot will accelerate extinctions due to the demands for space and minerals to drive the technologies to generate solar and wind power on the scale necessary to decarbonize. The U.S. utility and transportation sectors, for example, requires land use on a massive scale. Solar and wind occupy much larger acreage than oil and gas, requiring networks of roads and utility corridors, transportation and transmission capacity that doesn't exist today. Environmental lawyer Michael Gerard, founder and director of the Sabin Center for Climate Change Law at Columbia Law School, estimates that the U.S. needs a tripling or even quadrupling of transmission capacity, up from the 160,000 miles of high voltage power lines now in operation to move all the new green energy to consumers who are mostly in cities from the remote places where it's harvested. Yeah. Yeah. A report for the Brookings Institute states that wind and solar require 10 times more land per unit of power produced than coal or natural gas-fired power plants, a figure that takes into account the land torn up and habitat destroyed in order to drill out, pump, and transport fossil fuels. Renewable power production, the report states matter-of-factly, will take place in areas that have not seen energy development. There is also the global scale of mining that needed to extract and process the lithium, nickel, cobalt, rare earths, and other necessities from renewable infrastructure. The net result, decarbonization, will likely lead to huge fragmentation of land in the U.S. and overseas, particularly in minerals-rich China and the global south. And not just wildlife will be affected. The death villages around the Bayan Obo mine in China, source of 70% of the world's rare earths, are testament to the health cost of green tech mining, which is only going to accelerate in pace and scale. Again, for the people that think, I'm not trying to be mean. For the people that think we could take a whole couple more billion people or even a trillion people. Well, why is it that, do you think that humans are the only things that need anything on the planet, right? That we're going to sustain any level of the way of life we live. Like trillion, can you imagine? If there are even 2 more billion people on the planet, we're going to start getting into, an area where the, standard of living is definitely going to go down, because we're going to muck things up so badly that there just won't be a possibility for sustaining, life as we know it, or the good life as we know it, or whatever you want to call it. Consider the green destruction of habitat now unfolding in the Mojave Desert across California, and also all of those things that I just said relies on a knowledge of physics and math, and observational data, right? Alan Savory. If people want to quote Alan Savory all the time, looking at how things work, looking at nature, how it works, being aware of what's going on. And you just can't magically choose to, just because your belief system, whether it be God or whoever, Buddha or anybody, whatever it might be, or just, the abundance of, the new, whatever, the abundance of Gaia, or whatever however you want to look at it. You can't just suspend the laws of physics to fit your belief system. You just can't. That's where your belief system kind of runs into problems. Hey, Joseph, I'm going to take your call, but I want to end this article first. Start with, hold on. Consider the green destruction of habitat now unfolding in the Mojave Desert across California and Nevada, where the rush to build industrial solar is catastrophic for native flora and fauna. Well, it's just in the desert, it's just nothing's going on there. Nobody needs to live there. And a functioning desert certainly doesn't have an impact on a functioning forest, right? Or a functioning weather system. Right? Weather patterns don't rely on certain areas of desert, ocean, forest, All of these things working together to create a complex web of life, right? Utility scale solar is just as bad as urbanization and development, says Patrick Donnelly, who works at the Center for Biological Diversity, investigating the environmental effects of the renewable energy rush in the American West. The result is that the Mojave is in big trouble. Start with the site-specific Mojave plant species such as the tricorner milk vetch and the white-margined beard tongue. Lovely rare flowers, endemic only to certain valleys and basins. They are goners under the solar regime. From there, the picture only gets uglier, with the likely wiping out of huge stretches of habitat for the broad suite of Mojave fauna. Foxes, hawks, badgers, rabbits, and most prominently the desert tortoise, the keystone species of the Mojave, whose construction of extensive burrows provides homes for at least a dozen other species. If there were no desert tortoises to dig new burrows, states a Fish and Wildlife Service manual about the species, it would lead to the demise of the ecosystem. The worst thing these massive solar projects do is cause direct habitat loss for the tortoise and friends. Donnelly told me the grim future that rampant solar development promises for Mojave wildlife. I mean, if you think tortoises are useless or like, who cares about tortoises? What about bees? Right? You can't pick and choose. You can't. That's also another thing you can't do about wildlife. Well, we got to keep the bees alive, but F these spiders or these tortoises or these other, species of animals. Well, what if bees need all kinds of other species of animals to be alive and for their existence to continue? What if that were true? Guess what it is? You can't just say, well, I don't care about these groundhogs or these rabbits or these, sloths or these whatever that might be. I don't care about this particular this life form doesn't really matter. But bees, man, we're worried about bees, aren't we? Right? We are a little bit frightened about if bees went away. The worst thing these massive solar projects do is cause direct habitat loss for tortoise and friends. The grim futures that rampant solar development promises for Mojave wildlife is already in evidence, where migratory passages for tortoises have been compromised by existing solar. Climate change modeling tells us the optimal temperature range for the tortoise is moving steadily northward. So the tortoise will seek the path north to survive. Critical passages for this expected migration have been cut off. Ivanpah Valley, a bottleneck between the East Mojave and the North Mojave, is now severed by solar. Pahrump Valley, another passage to the north, is slated for solar that will have a similar blockading effect. There are tens of thousands of acres in the Mojave Desert containing what the U.S. Bureau of Land Management calls high-density populations of desert tortoise that are now being developed for solar, with the expected result, according to Donnelly and other watchdogs, that tortoises there will wink out, as in nighty-night. Some 60,000 acres of BLM land adjacent to near pristine Death Valley National Park have been proposed for industrial solar. One of the sites is Sarcobatus Flat, excuse me, a wild place mostly empty of human habitation, which is a value in itself, as wildlife needs big open spaces free of the meddling of Homo sapiens. Situated in the Great Basin Mojave Transition Zone, Sarcobatus is a vast valley of Joshua trees, greasewood, and blackbrush. The Joshua tree, which is the Fish and Wildlife Service is considering for protection under the Endangered Species Act, is on the path to extinction. Joshua tree woodlands being one of the most imperiled ecosystems in the American West, the solar project at Sarcobatus Flat would kill, bulldoze, and stack in cordwood piles between 50,000 and 70,000 of the trees, according to a field estimate by nonprofit Basin and Range Watch. The Great Basin Desert to the north, meanwhile, remains mostly free of the techno-industrial regime, but that's ending with the advent of new electrical transmission projects into the most remotest parts of Nevada, a project called GreenLink that electricity and natural gas provider Nevada Energy is funding. GreenLink North, pending approval, is planned to run along Highway 50, the famous loneliest road in America, from Reno to Ely, through some of the wildest parcels of public land in the state and prime habitat of the endangered greater sage grouse. This grouse, ground nesting bird, like the desert tortoise, is an indicator species of landscape health. The purpose of the transmission line, as Nevada Energy has made clear, is to render solar economically feasible in those remote, sun-rich landscapes. Green Lake North, along with the associated solar fields it will make possible, is expected to devastate some of the last strongholds of sage grouse in north central Nevada, as the birds are exquisitely sensitive to the light and noise of development. It may be that global society can achieve a measure of sustainability in climate terms, but on a planet that has been stripped of creatures like the tortoise and the sage grouse, shorn of natural agency, reduced of a biological pauper to a biological pauper, its last wilderness occupied for the greater good of the industrial juggernaut, we will be a kind of gleaming metallic Noah's Ark that carries few animals, only lots of people. Pondering these matters, Dan Ash has arrived at a revelation that amounted to a conservation biologist's worst nightmare. I've come around to the idea that a lot of the diversity of life on Earth may be incompatible with human ambitions and aspirations. On the other hand, he told me, I can be very optimistic about climate because ultimately humanity is going to deal with the carbon pollution. It's an issue for our well-being. We can solve it by building machines and making money. That's obvious in the Inflation Reduction Act. But with the biodiversity crisis, you can't solve it with machines, and it involves constraints on our making money. And history shows we aren't very good at constraint. Ash suggests that conservation biologists cease the empty claims about saving the planet with climate mitigation and start speaking truth. There is, at present, no plan in any country anywhere on a global or national scale to address extinctions, biodiversity crash, and habitat loss. Or just ask, what about all the fisheries that are losing all the fish? What about all the fishermen that can't fish anymore and the collapse of species in the ocean? My truther friends, what about that? What are we going to do about that? It doesn't really matter whether, that's because the rich people are the bad people and they're doing the things to us. I don't know. Who cares? What are we going to do about that? There is at present no plan in any country anywhere on a global or national scale to address extinctions. And it's not effing geoengineering, bro. It's just, their whole ecosystems are collapsing, and it's not geoengineering. I'm going to tell you that. I know it's nice for you to just go, well, it's just if they would stop doing this stuff, everything will be fine. It doesn't really matter. Again, whether they're doing it or not doing it, the fact is it's happening. What are we going to do about it? But all of that is an exercise in sidestepping culpability, unfortunately. And it doesn't really help anybody. And you're not helping anybody, and you're not really giving anybody any journalism or news or help with that particular subject. Ash suggests that conservation biologists cease the empty claims about saving the planet, blah, blah, blah. I read that. The dismal reality is that with a green build-out, we will be saving not the complex web of life on Earth, but the particular way of life of one privileged, domineering species that depends for its success on a nature-ravaging network of technological marvels. Only once this truth is understood can honest decisions be made about what kind of world humanity wishes to inhabit in the age of ecological disorder. That's a great, really good article. I hope you all enjoyed that. I'm going to take a couple calls, and then I think that's about all I'm going to cover for today. I'll take a couple calls. Check up on some coffees before I do that. I haven't not received any coffees yet today. If you want to support the channel, you can do so at the Buy Me a Coffee site, and you can leave me a note there. Or you can do the same at Rockfin. All right. Joseph, what you got?
Joseph, what you got?
Hello. That was an excellent article.
Yeah.
And
good.
if you look back at all your shows, it's kind of a mosaic of that article.
Basically.
That was an excellent article. Yeah.
Oh, we got a echo going on.
Yeah. Sorry. It's kind of a mosaic of that article. Basically. I'm trying to stop that. There we go. Sorry about that.
Oh, good.
And to get back to the part where you started with the oil and the electronics replacing fossil fuels being a driving force behind a large part of our industry, and how do we get across to each other that the compound energies and efforts it takes to produce those high-tech materials, that's where all the heat and added pollution occurs, and that's barely even considered in most of what gets disseminated to the general public.
Right.
And even in some of the best reporting from science misses that.
Yes. I mean, yeah, there's a real it's a struggle not to be very upset, at the amount of misinformation, disinformation, or non-information that people get about what's happening on the planet, or what's really, what is really going on? What's the mechanism of destruction? And it's hard because I get that, I understand why people don't want to assume responsibility for this, or they don't want to assume humanity's responsibility for this. But it's everyone's responsibility, even if it is, as somebody is saying in the chats on Colin, even if it is the U.S. military doing the polluting, or even if it is so-and-so corporation doing the polluting, I'm sorry, we are all responsible for allowing that to happen.
Absolutely.
We are all responsible. There's no getting out of it. To the bros out there, there's no getting out of it. There's no like, well, they're trying to make it like your fault and my fault. Yeah, it is. It's not, I understand, that a lot of that jargon comes from like, oh, well, they're going to make it your fault to control you, right? Like to put you on a carbon footprint app, right? I can see that happening. Sure. The people in charge. But again, if you allow that to happen, it is also your fault, right? If we allow that to happen, if we allow a dystopia on Earth as we careen towards climate collapse, that's still your fault. That's still my fault. It's still everybody's fault. It's a collective. It's common collective. It's humanity. Humanity failed to stop this, right? And that means all of us together. And there's no getting out of it. There's no escape. There's no finger pointing that is going to save you or the planet.
So who got credited with coining the phrase, the evil occurs because good people stand aside and watch?
Yeah, I don't know who. I know that phrase. I know that saying. But
Osama probably knows.
Probably.
It's the truth. And we credit ourselves with doing good as though that equates to not looking away, but it's still looking away. If it's going on, you're looking away to some degree just to exist under its structure. And
right.
I know we all deal with our own guilt from that subconsciously or consciously,
right?
But we have to get past not talking about it before that changes. You can't say, well, talking isn't going to do anything. Well, talking creates the plan and the interactiveness. I think that's the only way in.
Is that Stuart McCormick said Edmund Burke? I don't know if that's the person that quote is from. Somebody in the chat on YouTube said Edmund Burke, but I don't know if that's the.
Sounds like it could be right. I was thinking Sowell or someone, but I don't know. I get all the names jumbled up.
Me too. I mean, yeah, and it's like, we need to. I've said this quite a few times, which is like, basically, it goes like this: if we live in an age where Stuart is confirming that's who said that. Edmund Burke is the author of that quote. We live in an age where people really like to say it's not my job to fix the planet or fix the fix things or do the work or do you know what I mean? Like where we live in this age where it's like you can if you're talking about geoengineering or you're talking about the U.S. military carbon footprint or you're talking about the elites and their jets and you're talking about whatever it is, it's all a form of like, well, if they should just stop doing the bad things, right? Like, if only they would stop doing the bad things, then everything would be better. And I say this all the time, but nobody. I mean, obviously, people on the channel hear it, but like nobody in the wider world, I don't see a lot of people confirming this idea, which is that power concedes nothing without demand. So sitting around saying, well, if only they would stop the geoengineering. Well, dude, who's going to stop it? They're not going to stop it. You're going to stop it, right? Like if you think that's what's killing the planet, you better get busy, Jack, right? Because the planet's going to be killed, and you can't sit there and go, well, if only they would stop the geoengineering, then, well, dude, they're not going to do it on their own. Like, what? We live in this time of like, God, people, I don't know, live in some fantasy land of like, that's not how it works. That's just not how it works.
So if we put ourselves in the position of those that are actually in power, if you call it that, because they're really not. They're in power because they exist on top of the benefits of being in a position of power, but they're dependent on all the support system under them being at least moderately satisfied to keep them in power. And so what they want from you and me and our brothers and sisters in combat and arms is basically silence at least. They don't want to be complained at or hated. Yeah. So what do they do? In the background, they're going to do whatever keeps that happening. If people are complaining about things getting too hot, they're going to involve industry in whatever way they can to keep things at least appearing under control.
Yep.
And that's it.
Yep.
And so we're making the demand by demanding the environment for our subsistence and existence upon them without providing them an option. If they don't have an option, what are they going to do? They aren't the thinking class. They're the power class.
Right.
The thinking classes, they depend on the same thinking class you and I do.
Yeah.
In the whole of it.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge hurdle to get past because that's not the concept we exist within in our communities.
Right. I mean, absolutely. I mean, and every social revolution in the past, whether it be the civil rights protests or you just go back through history. Nobody said, "Oh, man, this slavery sucks. You can't wait till they decide to stop doing it." Right? Like, no, man. They were like whole wars fought over it, and people really struggled against it all the way up through the civil rights era when people said, "Oh, okay, well, we don't like this." They didn't sit around going, "Well, hopefully they'll decide to do better." It's not how.
And there were people underground working for and against. Yes,
people went to work. People went to work and put their lives on the line and put their bodies on the line. And you could apply, same with labor movements and same with all kinds of things. Like that's the only way things got changed was that people were like, "Yeah, all right, well, got to go do it," But I don't know. We people. There's just a whole new breed of person out there that's just like, well, golly gee, I hope they stop doing this stuff because it's bad. I like
consider if they did.
All right.
Let's consider what they could stop if demands were met. Say, let's pick a group that's fairly well intended, like the people doing the protesting. The Earth First people.
Right.
What happens if oil shuts down? Like you were saying in your last show, billions of people, or at least hundreds of millions, would certainly go hungry.
Oh, yeah.
Virtually
immediately, yes.
Yes. And aside from that, you'd have no production of solar power at all. No wind production.
Right.
Nothing would occur anymore.
Right.
And that's enormous conduit. That doesn't change that relationship. Those are machines that depend on the very industries they're trying to shut down.
Right.
So there has to be an alternative to what they envision as the future before you're going to align causes.
Mm-hmm.
And I, in my own experiences, that's really hard to do. Once they believe in something being in the alternative, it's pretty much a signed, sealed, delivered deal in their daily lives.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, and that's important too. Is talking about what what is the vision? What is the vision? What is the thing that you think should happen? But I feel like we're going backwards a little bit because it was only 4 or 5 years ago that people were like, yeah, we want Medicare. I'm just talking about in a political way. We want Medicare for all. Yeah, we want these oligarchs to get taxed. Yeah, right. There was all these plans.
Now we just don't want to be locked in our homes.
Right now they're like, oh, please don't take away all my stuff. Like that's it. You're right. Like they just never. They just
how to provide a better vision.
We've gone way backwards, right? We've gone totally backwards.
And
I don't know.
And faster and faster.
And the message is, well, we can't do anything. We can't vote our way out. We can't do anything politically. We can't do it. It's just like all I hear is like, no, don't try. Get out of the system, which is fine. Getting out of the system is fine, but it's like, are you sure? Are you sure that's the only way? Because I just don't. Historically, that's just not. That wasn't. Historically, that's just not the answer. And I don't think that's it's not like the answer this time.
Everywhere in the sorry.
It's not the answer this time either, because I just hear like, well, hopefully they stop doing the crazy stuff. There's no agency for you. You can't change it. That's the end. It's like, wait a minute, hold on. I think this is the most important time to be, right? This is the if what is happen if what is happening is what they say is happening, well, this should be the time when people are, most alarmed and most at arms.
Yes.
Right. This is absolutely the most crucial time, and the biggest message that I see people getting is, don't vote, don't try, don't be, don't have no agency, don't, whatever. It's like, okay, why is this messaging getting out there? It's baffling to me. It's almost, it almost makes me slightly suspicious, but I'm guessing this is just how people feel. But I'm like, wait, this is the worst time ever for humanity, and the biggest message that people are getting is, don't try. You know what I mean? Point fingers at somebody else and tell them, well, they better clean up their act. But otherwise, you personally can't change anything. All right.
It's the Nero time. This room is burning, but we must have a spectacle.
Right.
And I think the malaise is a continuum. Whenever you get to this phase of your civilization's existence, there's going to be a vast portion of populace that is in the malaise because of a helpless sensation that they may not even be conscious of. The problem is there's no better vision to point at that's working. No one has presented a functional alternative. And that's something, I hear, who is it? Nate Higgins? Higgins?
Oh, yeah, I think, yeah.
He speaks at great length of how all these things are interconnected and what he thinks should happen politically and financially. And he has some great points. Ultimately, you're back down to what works physically for the small group. It's got to come to that.
Right.
That's where the power has to come, because that unseats of all the stuff you just said. It unseats it. There's no need anymore to vote. Everybody's kind of pointed the same way. Until then, do everything. If all oars are pushing in the same direction, it doesn't really matter whether they're in the political pond, the financial pond, the environmental pond. As long as they're pushing the same general momentous way, they'll have an effect that just helps each other. But I don't see that happening. I see all the oars poking in the random directions.
Right.
That's a problem.
It is.
I think you're one of the people making sense when you say stuff, and the articles you read tie it together. So clone yourself.
Right.
maybe.
I'm just I'm just a dude in his garage. But I mean, like, you know,
Well, I
I'm
know,
just pointing.
not literally, but I mean,
I'm pointing out. I'm pointing out the holes in like how people are approaching whatever the problems are, and I'm and maybe even that isn't all that helpful, but um, and certainly people really are afraid to get out there and get it and mix it up, and get into it, because it is a scary thing. It's a scary thing. I you know I have that fear myself, and I think a lot of people do. I think and I think also that's where we're at too, which is like people really understand the consequences, and they're like, oh yeah, if I put myself out there, ooh, yeah, it could be bad times, right? For me and the ones I love, and that's a hard decision. It's a hard decision. So but
when you say put yourself out there, do you is that including just
I mean,
reducing your lifestyle and working with your neighbors? Is that putting yourself out there too?
I mean, that's the least. I think that's just something to do. I think that's just a positive way to live. Like, I mean, putting yourself out there as in like really going up against the power machine.
Okay.
Really opposing it in a way that makes you a target.
So if enough people just built their way together in a self-supporting communal way, linking, this
Yeah.
group, that group, and the other group, maybe they don't have to put themselves out there. Maybe it just sort of falls in place.
Well, I mean, yes, that would be ideal. However, I think that if that became a thing that was happening enough to the point where it threatened the people in power, then all of a sudden you would be a target, right? If there was a movement and people were doing a kind of like a localized, getting out of the grid or doing their own thing, or you know what I mean, definitely the people in charge would take notice and go like, hey, you're doing this thing.
But then you at least have something to fight for.
That threatens our system. Yeah.
Perhaps.
Sure.
Yes, but then there's an example that's physical and tangible that others would see. Something
Sure.
they get behind. Go, oh my God, that would be way better if we just did that and sang and danced for 3 days a week or whatever.
I mean, there are so many creative ways to circumvent what's going on. There are definitely a lot, and even technologically, even I see it every day, with things that people are doing to escape like censorship or to avoid or evade being watched online all the time, right? Like all these things are being constantly, people are finding new ways to kind of get around the walls in the system, and so there's there is I see glimmers of hope, and I see that we are always being creative. We're always like really super creative. People are, I like the hive mind kind of thing that happens when people kind of come to a certain level of consciousness, and they're like, well, we need to start going this way, right? Right. The people in charge want us to do this thing. We're like, nah, we're going to go over here. We're going to do it this way, right? I don't know.
Sure makes for the best books and movies, anyway.
Right. All right, man. I gotta let you go. I gotta let you go because I have another caller, and I gotta get out of here. But thanks.
Good job.
All right. Peace. Hey, William, what's up? How you doing? Thanks for waiting.
You hear me, Kev?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think little insight. I think Chris Hedges talks about the revolutionaries are in prison already. They made sure of that after Malcolm X, the omnibus crime bill. They put them all, rounded them up,
right.
And so we have we have 10 million people involved in the prison industrial complex between people on parole, probation, federal prison, and state prison.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just look at those behind bars, we have 4.3% of the world's population, nearly 25% of the world's incarcerated people. What I'm getting at is people are afraid. They saw what happened when people marched. They saw them get their heads cracked behind bars, prosecuted. We saw what happened with January 6th, which clearly what the hell, when police officers are moving what look like basically bike racks aside so people could come through, and opening doors. I
Right.
mean, there was a collusion there. I don't know everything that was going on. Who knows how much of it was staged, too much of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Only God knows. But the point being is they have the masses in fear. Yes? You see what I'm saying? And
Yeah. No.
when
Right. Yeah.
any,
Yeah.
so obviously that's how they control, and now,
I mean, that's what
so
I was kind of alluding to that because
yeah, you were.
people, that was, all of the political assassinations in the 60s and even the 70s, right?
Yes.
Political persecutions really put
Mhm.
a fear into people, right? And people are like, oh, yeah, I don't know if I want that, I don't know if I want to go up against the power of the state is pretty mighty. So, I get it. I get that.
Yeah. So you have that. Then they also have everybody in such survival mode now. What I mean is, used to be that, well, my parents bought the house in Trumbull for $16,000 in 1960. You know what I mean? Now, no matter how much you consider the cost of living increases and inflation, you can't get the 500,000, which the homes go for now in that area. Do you follow me?
Yeah.
Without the housing costs just going through the roof, and so people. What I mean is, and all other costs that is to have a living wage. If you had two kids, you know what I mean? Just to have a living wage.
Yeah.
So what I'm getting at is, like, I've talked to, like, I got arrested 4 times, and I'm on SSDI. Finally, I wasn't at the time. That a lot of people die in that process. That's a whole nother matter. That gets strung out forever before you even get a hearing. The point I'm trying to make is that now I can't do anymore. I got to have hips done and multiple surgeries. But I've talked to people on call-in, in smaller groups and stuff, and say, here's one way you can do it. If you're at the courthouse, you're on the steps, you're going to get arrested. If you're on the sidewalk, you're not. You see what I mean? You can protest at the courthouse. Those who can afford getting arrested can stand on the steps. Those who can't can stand on the sidewalk, but we can all be there together.
Right.
Sure. And you're not going to exceed a curfew because the courthouse is closed at 5. So you don't have to worry about that one, getting your head bathed in because you're out there after 8 o'clock. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
But what I hear over and over again is, yeah, but my job. Yeah, but, 63% of Americans go paycheck to paycheck. Do you follow me? So it's a little different time than it used to be. People within no time could end up homeless because of arrests and detention. And that's a serious problem, So
Right.
it's like the powers that be. Well, the evil minions of the world. Let's figure out how we can totally tweak everything the way we want and make sure that the masses can't rise up, really, because if they do, we just make it to the point where the risk reward isn't there. So people are in survival mode.
Right. Well,
you see what I'm saying?
I think that's what a lot of people are saying. This is a crucial time because we're nearing that stage where they will have people locked down so tightly that you can't. There's no way for you to mount a protest or to mount your dissatisfaction. So it is a crucial time, but I think I think it's going to take. It's really going to take a lot more. Especially in the States, is going to. And I'm not saying that people aren't out there trying, right? Like a lot of people in the chats are talking about, unionizing drives by Amazon workers and Starbucks workers, and there's all these people are doing the work, right, and getting out there and trying to like get fair treatment. But as far as like, really like mass protests in the name of like grand societal change, I'm not really seeing it in the States. I'm not seeing it. I see it more maybe in Europe or other places. And certainly you're seeing like protests in China against what's going on there. But like, humanity has to flex its collective will right? Before we lose the opportunity to do that.
Well, yeah, the other thing is we used to have a mass media that was a lot more diverse, like 15 companies. Remember, now it's down to, what is it, 5 or 6? And
Yeah.
so the CIA, they don't even hide the fact that they're infiltrated now. They just have them right on. Hey, we're doing this former CIA, blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
former FBI.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep. Yep.
And,
Yep.
and so what people, well,
Yep.
those who get their news from the mass media are well, let's I mean, there's so many issues, and I know you're almost out of time. So I just wanted to
Yeah.
plant that seed. I don't know how to fix it. You know what I mean? I'm just talking. I don't have solutions. I tried, and I've tried on calling in my own way,
Yeah.
and I keep hearing the kickback, and I understand it. So I just wanted to share it. So
Well,
anyway,
I appreciate you calling in, and I think that's it's important too. It's important to bring these subjects up and to talk about them. I think in different ways, or in a because I do think actually the conversations, maybe I'm partial, but like I feel like the conversations we're having on this channel are a little bit different than the conversations I'm hearing on other platforms or other channels, I guess.
oh yeah,
From like even close, somewhat like-minded people. I feel like there's a different level going on here. So, I think it's important to try and just push it out there as best we can. But I appreciate the call, William. Thank you for calling in. And
all right. Talk to you.
we'll do it again tomorrow.
Thank you.
All right.
Oh yeah.
All right. Peace.
Okay. Bye.
All right, guys. Yeah. I am gonna have to shove off, as it were. Thanks for hanging out, guys. We'll see you back here at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time tomorrow. And appreciate your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. I did check up the tips, or I did check them out. Have not received anything yet today, but that's all good. It's all good. Yep, that about does it. I'll see you all tomorrow. Peace out.